Our first training cycle for the 2022 competitive CrossFit season just started. For more information and to join, head to trainingthinktank.com.
There will be more and more. That's going to be the problem.
They say that's the marker of success, is how big your hater group is.
I know. People, well, Twitter's like just it's disgusting with all of that, but people follow other people, and then just every time they comment on how much they hate that person.
It is fun to hate things, right?
It is a little bit, but what does it mean about those people that they'll spend like their whole day waiting for somebody they hate to post something so that they could just spread their hate?
I've never done that, but
it just feels good to be.
I've made a fucking hobby out of hating on the new Star Wars. I mean, I'm almost happy that they did it because that's how much fun I have hating on it.
Have you ever heard of the Kevin Durant story where he had the fake Twitter and he was going on there and like defending himself and then hating on other players?
No.
And then he got caught.
It would be one of my favorite things to do an Instagram like that where I could just hate on other CrossFit groups.
Yeah.
Well, I do it to myself too. I think
Jordan does it at home. She has like 6 Reddit accounts, so she goes on there.
No.
Oh, you just blew her spot.
They're not saying anything.
No, wait.
Are we recording?
Hold on. Does your wife have Reddit accounts in the CrossFit Reddit?
Yes.
No way.
I love it.
Oh my God.
I'd like to find,
that is my favorite news of all time.
Yeah, you should go on there and just try to pick which one you think is her.
Is Reddit considered a social media?
Sure now, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's a community. Yeah, why not?
It's like Twitter, but you can do long form stuff and
No, I don't know if I'd call it like Twitter.
It's definitely not Twitter. Twitter's more like you're just one thought for the day. This is like they ask questions, like get feedback. What do you think about these training programs? But it's also like super varied, right? Like all kinds of stuff.
Every topic.
Yeah,
Right?
Well, I'd say the whole point of
decor.
Reddit is like you sharing something else from the internet or a thought. It could be a thought, but usually it's like, hey, check out this video or this.
Or what do you think about this
And
thing?
they post it and it gets upvoted and the bad stuff goes down because no one upvoted it. And same with comments. And that's why it's so cool is because usually the best stuff gets voted to the top. Like my favorite thing on Reddit is always checking what's the first comment. Because if you're going to laugh, it's going to be whatever first comment
Oh,
is.
so if somebody likes something enough, it just gets
always goes to the top.
Ah.
Could you imagine being in on the .com boom and like having the offer of like, hey, do you want dogs.com? We'll sell it to you for $1 or pets.com. And you're like, nah, this isn't going to take off.
Yeah.
Now those people are millionaires.
I know, just from having the domain name. There's
Exactly.
people that still do it. There's
for
people
sure.
that'll go like a young high school basketball player coming up and they'll buy their name.com.
And then sell it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
just in case they turn famous. I'm
Right.
like, that's an interesting business
It's so
model.
cheap now to buy one. You definitely can make some money off of that.
But it's hard to find good ones.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
My lips are still burning and my nose is dripping from eating that poke bowl. So I'm sorry if you see snot coming down. That's all I can think about.
Or your lips start cracking.
Oh
open.
man, they hurt so bad. I got this spicy chili sauce today and it was
Hey,
it was
speaking of
good.
websites, did either of you guys make a website back in the early days, like Angel Fire and what was the other one you could make, like the little first website makers back in the day? Did you make one?
I am a one-trick pony.
What is
not
hold on,
really
what is that trick?
being Max, which doesn't include making digital stuff.
I didn't even know you could make your own website until the GoDaddy commercials where they had like, who was it on there? Like Danica Patrick or something.
Oh, yes,
yeah. And I was like, oh,
she
wait.
actually did. She was probably a good marketing asset.
Oh,
for them.
fantastic.
Like she, most of the time, I think famous people getting associated with brands that can sometimes be like skewed in the person's favor. But I feel like she drew so much visibility to GoDaddy
for sure.
and they did like all Super Bowl ads and like big time stuff.
Yeah, they had like the best Super Bowl ad for so many years.
I can't even think of who the next popular website buying.
There is some domain. There's like
they're out there, but I can't.
domainname.com or like some.
So you
something
can't say it with
but I
confidence.
can't say it. But GoDaddy's burned into my brain.
Yeah, you were a little preteen boy watching Danica Patrick.
Don't blow my secrets.
You're not that old.
No, I don't know when it was. I'm just saying.
When
She would have been
like 10 years ago,
coming
maybe?
out of her prime. Probably.
I mean, has much changed since your preteen years?
Fair point.
Yeah, just a big
It's just-
adult.
yeah.
More impulse control, really. It's
Speaking of NASCAR, I talked to Jeff. Shout out Jeff.
Yeah.
So if you are watching the podcast, you'll see we have the 18 car behind us because Jeff works on the rear tires, and he was in the design for a while. Anyway, talked to him recently, And I was making fun of, I was like, dude, I was watching into NASCAR for 2 years. Everybody rolls their eyes at me like, why are you watching this? This fucking Formula One show comes out on Netflix and now everyone's interested in race stuff. And so I sent that to him and he laughed. And then I asked him, Michael Jordan bought a team. And I was like, man, NASCAR needs to do what's the show called?
Drive to Survive. Yeah.
Yeah. They need to do that for NASCAR, especially with Jordan involved. And then I asked him, I was like, hey, can you get a gauge on how involved Jordan is? Is he just kind of doing it or is he in it? And he was like, no, he's in it.
Like he's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I didn't realize, I mean, all
watch.
those interviews, he said he used to go all the time.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting to me.
I've heard that Jordan, every one of his little operations, like he's in it. Like he dives into these things every couple of years. You know, he built a golf course in South Florida and like all these pros go there now, but they talk about like all the cool stuff that he offers. And he was like there helping design the course, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think if you hold a standard of excellence like that, you can ever let it go. Just the competitiveness probably in him. Every time if he's building a golf course, he probably goes to places and is like, I want to do this better. I want to do this better.
See, that's why I want to, like, it would be so cool to spend a day with someone like that or a Tiger Woods or Tom Brady, which I know Chris makes fun of me for saying that, but those guys that
Tom Brady,
because I always talk about how good Tom Brady is or like how amazing.
I mean, he's the goat of goats, right?
He is, but like outside of their sport, what do they do different? If anything, I don't know, but like, what do they do different compared to the average person? And then like, can we learn things from that to take into the kind of the sport that we're in? You know what I mean?
I mean, I think definitely mindset, approach. Things are different though when you play different types of sports, even like within different positions within a sport. So I think the skill sets are probably not transferable into everything. Like, for example, I had a consult with a group of young kids and I was talking to their parents about training for CrossFit, and they come from martial arts background. And I was like, the mental attitudes, like there's definitely some work ethic transfer, but the mental attitudes of being good at racing and training and lifting weights and being technical is not the same as the mental attitudes and skill sets that are good for being in a fight or some combat situation. I think that'd be true for sports too. Like Michael Jordan's skills in managing a 5-person team and, you know, thinking quickly on the fly and conditioning for that type of sport. There's probably things you can learn from it, but you'd have to like take what you like from it and then figure out how to apply it to your thing.
Do you think some of like the mental resiliency though would be kind of the same across all champions? Like what makes Frazier so special in this sport? Like obviously he's a genetic freak, but there's something you can even see it before events or after an event. Like he was like on attack mode, but in a good way in the sport. Right.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, you know, you watch the Jordan documentary and it's like the same thing. He's like, I took that personally.
Yeah,
It's like this awesome story about just how,
I love the memes of I took that personally.
It's so good. Yeah. I don't know. I also don't know if they're transferable because they say mental attitude. Let's say Matt Frazier hit his peak the last year that he won the games at 30 years old. The mentality and all that stuff that he cultivated, the skill sets, the work ethic, the team creation, whatever the things that created that mindset were really a summation of the 30 years of stuff that happened before that. And part of developing that championship mindset is getting to the point that your work is being rewarded to the point that you believe that you can win. And then your self-belief in yourself that you can win is this self-fulfilling like avalanche process. So it's like, all right, well, if your competitive experience was you're like putting everything into it, you're doing everything that you possibly can, and you're just not good enough, you might not ever develop a championship mindset as an athlete. You might be able to observe it, but you can't really have a championship mindset without the tools to be a champion at the same time. So it's interesting to even have that, I don't know, as a thought experiment, because I always look at it and I'm like, I don't know if you can teach that. Like, I feel like you need perfect circumstances to have that.
No, I think I agree with you because that's where the last bit of exposure experience comes from is actually being a champion and learning from that. But if that's always the story that we tell, then what's to give anybody motivation to attempt to be a champion? You know what I mean? Like if it's always like, well, I need the perfect circumstances, then it's like, what do I need to do as a human being to get to the top level of whatever sport that I'm pursuing? I think that's the challenge that I have. It's like, if you're not willing to try because you're like, I don't have the right circumstances. Well, there are plenty of people that have said that they don't have the right circumstances and still fought through it and became something of themselves.
I really think that, I know it's cliche, but the mentality of trying to become your best versus the best is the strategy to do it. But it's really hard because if you're so outcome focused on being the best, you can sometimes lose sight of what's required to actually be there. And you hear all these stories of people like having some success and then realizing that in the process of getting success, they stop doing the things that make themselves successful. But it's interesting in those people, it seems like it's never enough. Like there's never a reward that's big enough for them to feel like they're satisfied to stop putting in that high level of work. And that is a different kind of person. It's just like most people are, if you sit like, for work, for example, most people like they're working for money. So if you went to them and said, "Hey, I'm going to give you $5 million," they would stop working.
Yeah.
But people that are like striving at that level, they seem to be driven by something deeper. Like money might be a part of it, but I don't think they correlate that it's just about the success of that. I think it's really just a strategy of excellence in some capacity.
We were talking about money in a different way. Excuse me. This is still
Good
the poke
point.
fresh.
Don't blame your jalapeno
sauce. We were out there again talking about the fight. One of the, I think, what's the guy's name? Paul, whatever his first name is.
Or which,
Jake Paul?
Jake
Paul. Yeah. They fighting this past weekend. And I was like,
Who won?
He won, but it was a decision.
It was a split decision.
Yeah.
I think
This was against Tyrone?
Yeah, Tyrone Woodley won in one judges and the other two were in favor of him.
So a split decision. That's a
Did you
I think
see
he's
it?
knocked out. No, I didn't, but they
see
were talking about it. So Jake Berman obviously loves watching, and he was talking about all those things. I said, well, how much money would it take for you to get in the ring, just like with someone like that, compared to like an actual professional in the UFC versus maybe like a Floyd Mayweather? And then going from that to like a Mike Tyson. So who would you choose? What obviously your background is in wrestling. So would you do UFC first or boxing?
I would definitely, if I was getting in a ring, I would definitely do UFC.
Just because you feel more comfortable
Yeah.
there?
I mean, I can strike and hit people pretty hard, but you don't realize how technical it is.
Yeah.
Like at that level, the things that
that's what I was saying. It's like, I would be like a fish out of water. Even if you could say, oh, I'm going to be tough, or I could train for it. It's like those guys are so good at what they do.
Yeah.
And then like all it takes is, I watched one dude get roundhouse kicked the other day and just was out cold.
Yeah.
I would not want that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not cool to get kicked in the head. It doesn't feel good.
No.
Well, I just started, so I kind of always circle back in some capacity to some martial arts training, and I found a kickboxing instructor here. I've been going and doing private lessons twice a week, and I never really. Hot? I'm going to ignore that. I never really had formal instruction, but I've like, if you hang around in an MMA gym and you're doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, somebody will probably have you hit a heavy bag or do something. So like I could kick a bag hard or I could punch a bag hard, and I know how to throw, a bunch of different types of punches. But then going in and having somebody who's an expert in that field, like have you do drills where he's like, hey, you can't advance forward unless you're throwing an attack. So like changing your footwork pattern. So you're not just stepping forward, and it's like learning how to dance. Right. And the whole structure of doing that is like, oh, I'm just learning like foundational things. There's nobody else hitting me back. There's nothing else going on. It's a very, very technical, artistic discipline that I don't think in general people really can appreciate without doing it. I think maybe it's kind of similar to CrossFit. Like you watch people doing thrusters and chest to bars and you're like, oh, it's just squatting and swinging around on a pull-up bar. But
exactly
at the highest level, it's a lot deeper than that.
I actually was going to ask you, because I've always been interested in doing a class, and we've talked about it a little bit, but like how much do you think actually translates over into like the sport like CrossFit? Or like, can you learn the same principles of like, you got to start from the very beginning? Like I talked about doing one of the jiu-jitsu classes that you were following, and like, it's like a 20-step process to get through all these. I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to start there. But then I tell my athletes, hey, we got to stop with your thrusters and fix your squat first. Like we're doing the same thing.
That I think is the principle that carries over and to all things. Like doing swimming drills, like if you start working with somebody like Kyle, you're doing head lead kicks, streamline push-ups off the ground. You don't think of, like most people, they just get into the water and they start doing freestyle and they start taking times of their intervals and they start trying to get better at it. Similar to how you would do CrossFit. It's like, oh, I'll just do couplets and I'll benchmark them and I'll retest them and make sure that they get faster. It's like, but if you're at a beginner, the fastest way to get to a high level of expertise is learning the fundamentals really well, but it's super boring for people for some reason. I kind of enjoy it because for me, it's like learning. It's like learning how to work my mind and my body together. And there's no like not as much physical stress.
Yeah.
With CrossFit or like conditioning or doing hard strength work, you feel the stress, right? Like it just like comes out of your body.
I think people go through these cycles. It's almost like this perpetual thing that happens where you love CrossFit, so you want to do a lot of hard CrossFit. And if you see success in that, then you're just going to keep doing the same things. Like the hard work pays off, which to some degree is true. It just, where's the hard work spin?
Well, also, how long does the hard work pay off? Because if your strategy, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say like that happens. And then all of a sudden you do start getting beat up or you get run down or all of a sudden your scores aren't going up. That's when you take a step back and say, okay, now I need to fix my technique or go back to the basics. The problem with that system is that once you get beat up or once you've been in the sport a long time, it's really hard to change the basics. You can't get out of those bad patterns. And so I just kind of wonder, going back to what you were talking about, is it easier for you to do the basics because now you see that from coaching people? Like now you know, like those things are going to pay off more than just jumping in and going hard all the time.
I think I like the basics better because I realize as a coach, they're necessary. So there's like immediate buy-in in my own psychology.
Right.
There's no resistance. I'm not like, I don't want to be standing and stepping. Like I want to be breathing hard, which sometimes people have because they don't really understand how important fundamentals are in mastery. I think the other thing is my approach to athletics, it really fucked me as an athlete, right? Like in spite of having pretty good success in a lot of things, like, you know, even just getting the opportunity to have Division I scholarship offers in 2 sports, like that took a lot of work at a pretty early age and I'm pretty proud of it. But when I look back on it, I'm like, I definitely like peaked too early. My approach mentally injured me because I wasn't willing to do some of the smaller stuff. I didn't really ever put enough time into conditioning. I was super gifted at learning skills quickly, but like Mia, for example, like we talk about muscle ups a lot and she always jokes and tells me not to say it, but I learned how to do muscle up in a day. Like I just walked in and I did a strict muscle up and was like, oh, here's how it is. And then it was like, no, you got to learn how to use momentum. So I learned how to do a kipping in another day. The problem with that and not learning the fundamentals is they're super inefficient. Whereas Mia's strategy of actually having to learn it from the ground up, body lines, positions, developing the strength, going through this sequence, hers had longevity. Whereas mine didn't necessarily have longevity. So when I started to get hurt and aches and pains, my body's pretty big for a CrossFit athlete. So like the pounding, if my knee tracking is not good. So I think I have to circle back to the fundamentals just to be able to tolerate the work. It's not even a choice. It's like, if I don't do this shit, I can't participate and have fun because it just hurts too much.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it happened.
That's kind of the end of that circle that I was talking about. It's like you always end up coming back to that, or people that want to stay in any sport for a long time. They're like, I need to go back to these basics so that I can continue to do it at a high level and not feel the pain that I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. I mean, it is what the concept of an off season is. Like Tom Brady probably in the off season goes back and he works on his 5-step drop and his 3-step drop and moving from side to side and running left and throwing and running right and throwing. He doesn't have 300-pound freak athletes running him down and trying to put like their shoulder.
I don't think he has that even in practice. They're like trying to protect him so much. Don't get close.
Yeah, but they don't.
I get what you're saying.
And he's not playing full-time games. So I think the same concept with physical training is there needs to be, Paul Chek calls it working in. And I find that just naturally, I think I work in better. I'm a more introspective
Explain what
person.
that means again.
So working out is what you would typically see as popular in the exercise sector. You go out, you grunt, you breathe hard, you get tense, you expend, and you put energy outward. Working in is like the softer side of physical development, breathing, meditation, even I think mindful bodybuilding, where you're focus is on one singular part of your body and you're trying to really focus on how that joint moves, how you contract it, the speed at which you contract it. Those skill sets I think are different. Now, you can have somebody that's naturally more interested in working out, right? And I think those are generally your fitness influencers. They're high energy people that need stimulation all the time. Maybe in the bodybuilding world, it's a little bit different. You see, I think a little bit more like the introspective people that are maybe more relaxed and kind of like Buddha-esque in that field. But in CrossFit, it's like A-type people who work out. But what ends up happening is you crash. And what happens if you crash? Let's say you hurt your knee, you go back to working in. So you go and you start doing knee rehab, knee drills, all this accessory work. So I just say, well, be preemptive with that cycle. Don't fucking kill yourself working out to the point that you're forced to work in, and build that cycle of working in and working out into your daily life. Chris sent me a Michael Jordan documentary that was talking about,
it was an interview.
Yeah, an interview. Can you give context for the interview?
Yeah. So basically, it was a interview by an Australian company. You can
No, not that one. The other one. You're
talking about
his
LeBron.
strength. Oh, sorry, LeBron, not Michael Jordan. LeBron.
Jeez, you gotta call LeBron,
Michael
Michael Jordan.
Yeah, whatever.
All right, let's
they're
end
the
this
GOAT
right now.
family.
So what you're talking about
Yes.
then is the LeBron interview on the Tim Ferriss podcast with him and his trainer.
Okay, so and as they were talking, they were basically circled back to like, what are the things that allows you to have longevity in the NBA? If you look at an NBA season, like the amount of force it takes, if you're 260 pounds or however much he weighs, and he's 35 inches up off the ground and he's landing, like even just doing a couple of those a night for every game. And that doesn't include running up and down the court, changing
82
direction.
games too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really is almost an endurance sport at that point to participate for that long. And they were talking about recovery being a continual process. And I think of one of the things as recovery is like movement work. It's stretching, meditating, doing basic warm-ups where you're focused on knee, joint, ankle, where you can actually slow down. And I think that's just not really that popular in the CrossFit space, but it's because CrossFit's so young. And I'm like, all right, well, these protocols, you might get a 1 in a million type person who can just handle doing this for a decade straight, which you also have to take into consideration that some of those people might also be doing things that enhance their ability to tolerate it. So it might be even less than 1 in a million that can actually handle it. I think you have to take into consideration that the ability to have longevity in anything is going to require you to slow down at some capacity.
Yeah. I want to kind of take the listener on a journey though of how you got there, because I think our paths were actually very similar, like playing football. And, you know, the tendency is always when you're young, and at the time that many years ago, it was just go hard in the weight room, go hard in the field. You got to suck it up when you have injuries and you're kind of pushing yourself. What was your training background like when you were in high school and college? And then how did that kind of change over the next couple of years as you moved out of college into like your own kind of training environment?
Yeah. So, I mean, it started young because my dad was super into training, and maybe in a little bit of an unhealthy way, but those skills were super valuable. And it was like, come into the gym, and his background was judo and karate and martial arts. So the gym wasn't necessarily about doing like powerlifting or weightlifting. It was about like burning and dealing with more burn and doing bodybuilding protocols, because that was what he would know, and doing extended sets and throwing up, doing like that type of a mental toughness training to get yourself like, if you're getting ready for some sort of a combat situation, what you realize is like, you can't really expect what you're going to feel in that moment. Like, it's kind of like training for CrossFit is you're like, oh, well, what's it going to feel like when you get in an event? But
Totally
then you get to the event, it's like, no, you can't.
For sure.
Yeah. So you really try to make your training as tough as you possibly can. So that way you're less likely to experience something that's out of your comfort zone. So in the process of trying to build that comfort zone as wide as possible, I learned how to push my mind into very uncomfortable places. But what I didn't learn in that period of time was like technique of things. Like, so we'd be doing like conditioning on the football field, running back and forth and like going until I couldn't do it anymore, or until my form was completely broken. I looked like a refrigerator moving back and forth. So my training, I think that mindset carried for years. And then I started realizing like, if you take this brute force approach to something, so my back hurt, for example. So instead of learning how to warm up and whatever, I'd be like, okay, well, I don't want to bend over right now. And I know if I get started in this workout and I start really aggressively and I get a dump of adrenaline, I'm not going to feel it until it's over. And then I'll just rest and take a leave. And really appreciate how stupid that was.
Yeah.
And that like warming up and taking time off and figuring out why it was hurting in the first place. And then I just got to the point where I was like physically broken. I mean, in the course of 3 years from 17 to 19, I got reconstructive shoulder surgery, broke my ankle, broke my wrist, got knee surgery, and then herniated like 2 or 3 discs in my back. And I remember my first back injury was the one that like, it just scared me, honestly, because I was deadlifting. I heard something pop in my lower back. It hurt a little bit right away. And then within like 30 or 45 seconds, I felt all the muscles in my back tightening up so much.
Such a scary feeling
Yeah, like
too.
I couldn't bend over and I was like stuck upright. And I went to school at Lehigh, which is on a mountain. And you literally have to walk up, I'd say 400 steps to get to the dorm that I lived in my freshman year. And I remember I saw the weights on the ground. I knew I couldn't, it was deadlifting like somewhere around 500 pounds. There was a bunch of metal plates on the side. And I was just like, fuck. I just walked out. I walked up to my dorm. I laid down and I didn't leave my dorm, I think, for like 3 days other than just to walk to the bathroom and back because my back was in so much pain. That pain process and cycle, it lasted for years and it stopped me from doing things. It stopped me from playing sports. It stopped me from wanting to play sports. And that mindset started to change about training at that time. I started to look for experts and mentorship and guidance because as a kid, you basically just model your role models. And I think, if you grow up in a house with a father as a son, oftentimes that father is your role model for development. But even just looking back on it retroactively, the mind tools that you have as, let's say my dad was, I think he was like 39 when he had me. So let's say I was 10. He was like almost a 50-year-old man. The mindset tools you have at 50 are not going to be the same at 15. So you're like, I was embedding in these things of like, well, this is what a mature fighter at, 15 or 20 years in the game or a football player. Like I was absorbing the wrong things at that time. Right. And I don't think I had the guidance of somebody that had instructed somebody from the ground up. So I went through the process of trying to find people to help me. Like, how do I manage nutrition? Why is it that I could barely eat anything and just keep getting bigger? Why is it that, my back is killing me? Why is it that my knee's killing me? How do I rehab these things? Because I didn't rehab them. I broke my ankle. And then I think 6 weeks later, I wrestled at the Empire State Games. It's like,
you're just like, I got to get back.
And it was encouraged too.
Right.
Like, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but it was stupid. Like you have a 220-pound kid who just hit puberty that, you're not really in your own yet for most people. You haven't learned single leg strength, balance, stability. So you're going out there with all these aggressive, like change of direction movements and all this stuff really, really, really quickly before I did any of the basic work, just to establish like simple things like standing on one leg and lifting up the other leg on my right side and not falling over. I was just like, not able to do that.
Yeah.
So I think I learned through guidance and education and Poliquin system and OPT system, basically like how to think for myself about training in a more mindful way that included sport performance and longevity. And sport performance, I think the major learning is that as a younger person, the tools you're trying to develop are different. You're trying to learn how to be efficient. You're trying to learn how to slow down because you're already good at going fast and having a lot of energy because you're young. But if you develop those skills right at the beginning, then I think when you actually hit your athletic peak, you can, step into them. It's like Frazier getting Olympic level instruction as a teenager about, progressions,
learning how to move well.
Yeah. I mean, that I really think is the key.
Yeah. One of my biggest regrets is coming back. This is the same story, obviously.
The knee. Tell the story.
No, when I broke my leg or really it's the ankle was where I broke it, dislocated it. And I came back so quickly from that injury. That was my junior year of college because I wanted to play again. And, I was like, look, the only focus that I have is getting back on the field and just playing and having fun. And I did that and I came back the next year, but I'll never forget. I think I probably have told this story on a podcast before. It was the first practice back. And of course they're filming everything. And so we come in after practice and we review the film and I see this dude running across the field and I'm like, who in the world is that? Like they look awful. It was me because to be able to run, I just started running again and not relearning the patterns that I needed. That ankle didn't move anymore. Yeah. I mean, it was just a sloppy mess the entire year. And then I got hurt game over game with little tweaks just because that whole leg didn't move the same way. And so I would always, if I could go back, that's probably the one thing that I would change from my college years is just take the time. And even if it means I didn't play that next year and I had to, get another red shirt and then play the following year, it would have been worth it because then I wouldn't have to go through all the stuff that I went through now.
Yeah.
And I think that this is kind of the same story that you're telling of like, this is why you're where you're at and what you're preaching now about training and your systems and the mentorship program that you're about to start. Like all of those are, let's lay a foundation that doesn't sink. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that really is if I look back at what I've been trying to create, it was all of because I had dreams when I was young of being a professional athlete, of a championship athlete. And I thought I was doing the work. Noah talked this year about the games about having this crisis of conscience because he was in the environment and he thought he did everything that it could take to win. And then he was getting external feedback that he wasn't good enough. Yeah. And it was a tough thing to handle. I think that same thing. And I had so much performance pressure on me so young because I had a lot of early success in wrestling and football too. Like it was just like these things came natural to me. I was pretty big. I got really strong when I was young. I was aggressive. Like I had some of the tools that were just kind of necessary to excel in those sports. But as I kind of evolved and learned about the things that I didn't do well, I just thought about, well, what would I want young Max to know? Yeah. Like if I went through all this experience and, the struggles of trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur in an industry in the United States, it just at a simple level of, I think the stat right now is 40% of the US population is obese, which probably means 40% of the population doesn't care about fitness. Maybe some of those obese people are fitness enthusiasts, or maybe they're on their way down, but say a big portion of them. So we know as a society, we don't really value physical training.
Right.
And at the professional level of sports, in order to get a touch of a professional athlete that has that kind of visibility, you got to be really good or you got to be really lucky and get with them really early. Like a brand like Proven, instantaneously successful because they have the female GOAT athlete. It doesn't need to necessarily be proven in any other capacity downstream. And that's a different process. I didn't have that necessarily in CrossFit or in other sports. So as I kind of went through this journey, I was like, okay, well, what would I need to know about entrepreneurship? What would I need to know about sales and marketing? What would I need to know about training younger athletes? What would I need to know about setting a foundation and off seasons and life balance? Like, and I've heard Froning say it before that like champions don't have balance. And I saw a young kid hashtag that. And I'm like, man, first of all, I don't know I don't agree with that. I don't think all champions don't have balance. I think it does take some obsessive focus, but also what's the impact of that? What if that kid doesn't have any of the tools that are necessary at all to get to the highest level? We should be teaching that kid balance. So that way, if he doesn't achieve something, he still has self-confidence and self-awareness and an understanding of what he wants to accomplish in this world and how to give back and how to be okay.
Well, I mean, the fact is that there's only one champion every year. So if there are a lot of people without balance, there are a lot of people that are going to be screwed at the end of the year. And I think that's such a dangerous thing to think or believe.
Yeah. What's the burnout rate of CrossFit?
Oh,
I mean, it's so quick high too, because I think a lot of people think that they could bypass the fundamentals, or you get this, it's really bullshit progress. Like when you first start at something and you're PRing everything, you're not PRing because of the work that you're doing. You're PRing because you're a beginner.
Right. But you've never done that movement before. You better PR.
Yeah. And then I think most people, sadly, they burn out of CrossFit because they got injured because they were pushed too hard too soon, which I think was my problem, is pushing too hard before I had a foundation to actually absorb the work, or because they are getting to the point that the work required for progress is not worth it anymore.
Right.
But most people, I don't think, get to that because they don't work for long enough and consistently enough to do it. And in CrossFit, if you're just like taking classes or dabbling, you can probably make progress in all these little things for maybe 3 or 4 years because you're only touching them like once every 2 weeks or something like that. You're not actually sitting down and getting like I'm going to get better at my snatch type thing. That mindset is usually only in the competitive side of the sport.
Yeah. I've actually run some of the numbers on this for the masters categories. And in reality, the progress is maybe only 1 or 2% a year. And that's not person to person. It's literally just like the trend of the sport. Most people are actually deteriorating year over year in those categories. It's the truth. Like the difference in the 35 to 39 division, the top 5 average men in all of the open workouts versus the 40 to 44 was 10%. I mean, that's a big gap. That's a minute on a 10-minute workout. And so there is that deterioration that happens. And so especially as you get into those levels, it should be more of like, where is my balance and longevity so that I can not only do this, but do other things that I want to pursue in life?
Yeah. And then maybe having an ability to think for yourself and consciously understand that there are times where you have to sacrifice in your attempt to create life balance. You're kind of juggling all these things. It's like a little equalizer. So there might be a time that, like, let's say use Travis as an example, where his competitive hat is turned all the way up. And that might mean he loses a little bit of work and focus in the other areas. But to me, that's not a loss of balance. It's an understanding of what's required to maintain balance and strive for peak performance. You have to be making these sacrifices. So, I mean, maybe it's just misconstruing the words. Maybe what he meant by that was that he only focuses in one thing. But I mean, from the outside world, that doesn't really seem to be the case if he's got a brand that he's building and kids and whatever. So I really do disagree with the message.
Yeah. And that's not a knock on Rich or what he's doing, but it just, in general, I think we would both agree that we would probably go about it a different way.
Yeah. And I think the messaging.
But neither of y'all have won, though.
The games, won things.
Yeah.
You mean won the games?
Yeah, won the games multiple times.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's
10 times. Or
I think that's the challenge in general with any sport. Yeah. And it's also, I mean, he has earned that right. He won at the highest level, or Jordan is the go-to basketball. So he can say certain things that may not be true, but because he won, I mean, you hear this all the time.
Or they're true for him, but they might not be broadly applicable to everybody else.
Well,
that's probably what it is. I don't think regular people, like, you should be inspired by the champs, but I think at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to do the amount of sacrificing that they do.
I actually don't.
And you're not getting rewarded for it either. Like, you're not getting money to do that.
Yeah. I still don't think that they're true for those people in most cases. Some of them are, maybe more on like the mental side, but here's a perfect example. And those that hate golf will have to kind of follow me here, but Brad Faxon's like one of the best putters of all time. And back in the 90s, he said that when he was like top 5 in the world, that he would make sure that he hit when he was putting well, he'd hit every single putt past the hole at least 3 feet. Well, somebody went back and looked at all his numbers, and because they wanted to follow it, and he was only like 35% past the hole. So in his mind, he thought he was hitting the putts hard, because to putt well, you have to hit the putt hard is what his motto was, right? But in reality, he wasn't hitting most of those hard. He was actually leaving them short of the hole. So my whole point of saying that is, I think that champions, they're great to look at and be inspired by because of what they're doing. But I don't know if you want to take advice from someone that they are living a different life. And because of that, it's very hard to say these things are applicable to what I'm doing in my pursuit or my journey in the same path.
I mean, what did the putt guy have to do with anything?
The point the point is that basically he said, if you want to putt like me, hit it past the hole.
Oh, but he wasn't a champion. He was just
he's the best putter of all time. He's known as has the best putting.
He's probably won. Brad Faxon's won majors and stuff.
He's won a ton, and he also has the best strokes gained putting in the world, which is like means you're the best putter. The point is that people say all the time, like Michael Jordan probably says that he feels certain things on the court, but feel and real are different, and that may not be what's actually happening. So I think in this sport as well, we hear things that the best are doing, but like if I try to train like Matt Frazier, that's not going to let me be my best self. Right?
Well, so first of all, there's two different champs in the CrossFit realm, and both of them have different mindsets and approaches. So there's just like one very easy thing to say, that to become the best in the world, there's already 2 different people with 2 different approaches on the male side of the sport that figured out how to make it work, which means that if a new one's coming, they're going to probably have their own way of approaching the game. They're different. They have different background. Like, everybody's unique. The other thing is, like, just at a simple level, like Froning's putting out a competitive program and training teens. But what Froning was doing for training when he was a teen was different. I mean, he was playing sports. Apparently he went to play college baseball. I don't know if he played football. There's videos of him doing it. He was doing strength and conditioning, maybe bodybuilding training. So the foundation that he built that allowed him to be successful down the road was different than what the current training is. Right. And I think that can a lot of times get lost on a market of viewers that's looking at it and trying to do what the greatest is doing. And it's like, yeah, I understand that, because I think we all fall into that trap, but maybe the more important thing is to try to figure out how to do what they did and back engineer it.
So that's the question that I have for you then. All of the people that are in the sport now, they played other sports when they were teenagers.
Yeah.
Now, all the people that are coming up are only playing CrossFit or whatever you want to call it, right? They're not doing a ton of other sports. Do you think that's going to have a positive or a negative impact on the sport long-term?
I think it'll have a positive effect on the sport. I think it'll have a negative impact on those kids.
Yeah.
And like, I started working with some young athletes and I had conversations with their parents. I'm like, look, there's a ton of research about like youth baseball and kids getting overuse injuries and having to have UCL surgeries, like super early in their careers. That early specialization isn't always good.
Dr. Tom House, by the way, for those that listen to any of his stuff, he has some great stuff on that as far as specialization and not doing it.
Yeah. And so like I coach them very differently. I know some brands out there are having those kids do a lot of CrossFit. And yeah, if you got to get good at snatching and chest to bars and handstand push-ups and handstand walking, you definitely have to do some of that. You have to do some foundational stuff. But I've also tried to encourage them, like, get out of the box, play a sport in high school, like go and meet people and go and do other physical things and physical challenges and just learn how to have physical literacy before trying to become great. But it's sometimes a difficult discussion because they're like, well, I want to win the 14 to 15 division. Right. And I'm like, so yeah, but if you actually want to be great long-term, the 14 to 15 division probably doesn't mean shit. Like, maybe
I can confirm it really does.
Well, to make a living in the sport, especially, you want to wait until you're 18 plus, and then you can go make real money and have a lifestyle.
And the two girls, Emma Carey and Mal O'Brien, are both 17 and now like already at a world level in the sport because it's young. And that might actually be the case anyways. Like people were like, oh, well, that might just be because the sport's young, but there's also tennis players like Naomi Osaka, I think was like 16.
She's super young.
Yeah. So, but she also just had this like mental health breakdown type thing that she had to step away from the press. I think there's consequences that societally and culturally in CrossFit, we should be encouraging is like, what do we want our champions in the future to be like? What if they're going to be championing the ideas of doing CrossFit, training CrossFit, doing all these things? The education and instruction they get at an earlier age is going to dictate what they are in the future.
So what does that look like for you then? Obviously you're building out a new mentorship program, which you've done one before.
Yeah.
This new one starts in a couple of weeks. Do you know the actual date on that? September
19th is our first video release. So it'll be live like shortly after this goes up.
Cool. So with that, what are you trying to get out? Like I know that you're taking all your experiences and putting them, into this, but what, if you were taking that young person or the coach, what are you trying to teach them?
It's not for the athlete. I mean, I think maybe I'll get to that at some point, but it's for the coach, which I think will have a downstream effect on the athlete.
Because we need better coaches.
One of the foundational principles of Training Think Tank, when I was growing up, I remember telling one of my high school friends that I wanted to be a football coach. It was like my ambition, but it was very contrasting to how I did in academia. I was pretty successful and testing really well on math and encouraged to go and cultivate that skill and go into Wall Street and build options trading models and learn how to make more money. It was like the thing that was the culture of the area of New York that I grew up, because it was most of the people that were commuting to Wall Street. So it was like, don't waste your brain on coaching. And I absorbed that. I went to school for finance because of that guidance. It ended up actually helping me out because I wanted to figure out how to build a business with my passion of training, but I hated that lifestyle. So when I started Training Think Tank, I was like, I want to professionalize the concept of a coach, figure out how to make sure that coaches can make enough money to live and do this long-term, because coaching in CrossFit was really transient. You'd have these people that would quit their professional engineering jobs, open a CrossFit, and then be like, I can't make a living doing this, and then go back and get out of it.
I've heard that story so many times. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to mentor people, I want to figure out how to get the younger people early, so I can teach them foundations of program design from the ground up, like movement, assessment, strength, energy system training, CrossFit periodization, group classes, small group classes, what the skill sets are that are different for each one of those. And that's what people, I feel like, come to me for a lot, is like the program design side of it. But then there's also like the philosophical component of thinking about life, who you want to be when you're future, goal setting, just becoming a better human in the process, and realizing that you as a human are going to be a reflection of whatever you do. right.
as a personal trainer, as a coach, as a brand owner. Like, you are the cultural leader of whatever you create. And even if the creation is just a small personal training network, you're going to culturally lead them. Whatever your beliefs and ideologies are going to permeate into them a little bit just through proximity. So I wanted to help people think about those things. And it's not like sexy, I feel like sometimes, for people to think about philosophy, because we're not encouraged in our younger academic years to think about challenging, difficult things. So I try to put and integrate that all into a singular curriculum that's just like, hey, I want to make you better coaches, better people, more competent, more able to make money with your competency, and then figure out in the process, how do you take all those principles and then make them uniquely yours? Because I have a certain set of skills and I've tried to leverage them over the years. I also, like we joked around earlier on the podcast, not really that good with digital media and creation of websites and whatever. So like I figured out how to hire people that could do that shit because I can't.
Right. Lean on others.
Yeah. So I think that same thing's going to be true for a lot of people. Some people might crush groups and be extroverted. So figure out how to monetize doing that. Some people might be very introverted and want to do research and program design. But if you don't have a foundation of understanding that whole big picture, I feel like you're just setting yourself up to be pigeonholed before you even have an opportunity to decide what you want to do with your coaching career. So that's my long-winded way of saying, like, that's what I wanted to basically teach. Like, young Max, if you were getting into this and you wanted to do it better from the start and not make a ton of stupid ass mistakes, what would I?
It's the letter to yourself. Have you guys ever heard the Brad Paisley song "Letter to Me"?
No. Sing it. Almost a
You guys aren't country fans. Can you just overlay it?
It could be the conclusion of the podcast.
I don't remember the words. This whole story, it's a country bumpkin way of saying it, but basically all these things that I regret. I wish you would have learned this and that. So
for sure.
That's so true.
Sounds like a country song.
It very much is. It's funny because, all the coaches here, like we are all good at some things together, right? Yeah. But like all these different talents, but that's what's made it so special, like having all these different feedbacks. So it's not the same loop over and over and over again. I think that's also something that's been nice as a coach to be able to almost, like, you've mentored me in the past, but now I can lean on all these other coaches, hey, Kyle Ruth, what do you think about this for swimming? Or, hey, Adam, what about this for, bodybuilding or whatever I want to do? I can lean on all these other people and kind of get ideas. And that's allowed me to grow as a coach as well.
Yeah. I mean, my whole concept of learning was primarily through mentorship. I didn't go to school for exercise science. Right. I went to people in the field.
You saved a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Biggest waste of my
life. But finding people that could teach me about nutrition and finding people that could teach me about biochemistry, even finding coaches, like I've learned so much about swimming from Kyle Ruth, and even in application to my own training and in application to how I train other people. And I think when you find people that have had some level of success or experience in the thing that you want to do, it's important to find those people and leverage their knowledge so you can make better decisions. I mean, I think that's how the human race moves forward, is through the mentorship of the current generation and all the mistakes that they made. And then if the information is passed correctly downstream, the people that are smart enough or aware enough to learn from those mistakes before making them themselves will catapult. And like Cena's interning, and I was talking to her and I'm like, you are so much farther along in your process at 20 than I was. By the time you're 35, if you're still into this for another 15 decades, you're going to move the industry.
15
years. What did I say?
15 decades.
Oh, sorry.
Like, God, she's old.
When she's 170. No. But seriously, I mean, she'll push the industry forward. And I think that's what the goal is to figure out, like, there's a humanitarian side of me that really worries about culture. And I think the death of our physical culture, the fact that like kids don't learn physical education, that's like legit physical education, just basic things, how to take care of yourself, what breathing means for your anxiety management, what training can do for your longevity, what strength training can do for your hormonal profile and bone density, like all of these things that are like expert knowledge in fitness. I'm like, this shit should be taught to more people so that way they can just live better lives. So I feel like there's a moral imperative for me to figure out how to get that information out. And I don't think I'm
Start a TikTok.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I don't think I'm a preacher. Like, I think my way of life is teaching by an example. And so if I say like, here's what I think a professional coach is, I want to make sure that I'm being a professional coach, teaching other professional coaches. And then eventually in that network of mentorship, I'll find a preacher in there that will then go and do that.
What about the one right across from you?
Maybe he might be the guy.
What? No. Yeah, I wish, obviously you've helped me a ton over the course of the last, 6 or 7 years, but I wish that I had something like that, because a lot of my learning was from just like reading books and then applying it incorrectly and learning and then reapplying it. Figuring it out.
I mean, I wish I had it even like hiring for Training Think Tank.
Oh yeah.
I wish I had that process formalized so that I could give it to people before I hired them,
right?
Which is what I did with the system. I was like, hey, I start this process. I bring Brannen on. He brings on athletes. I try to mentor him through the athlete, but inevitably I have my own workload. I have all this stuff. It's hard to get all that stuff organized and communicated in some sort of a digestible way. So the mentorship program was like, all right, well, this is a solution to all of that. It's like all of the foundational knowledge that I think I could accumulate from my, whatever it is, 15 years of experience into something that's digestible, which then can move the conversation forward. It's like, all right, well, now you got it. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
Well, if nothing else, it got us Perrin and Kyle Habdo. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They can demo all our throwdown workouts.
Yeah.
They've been on like every single one lately.
How many people were in the first one?
12. Yeah.
And they were the best two, or they were just the only ones that wanted to continue with the job?
I don't want to make the other 10 feel like they weren't good. No, but I think they stood out as people that they weren't the only two. I think there are other people that I talked to about employment that just, didn't want to move or they had other things going on, but they were two that, like, in the process of mentoring, you realize like, I'm going to tell you all the things you got to do, but you still got to do it. You realize that there's some people that just aren't going to do it.
Right.
So there's an aspect of that. And you could tell right away with them that they got into it to learn and do and apply. And I just thought that was like the character traits of what we would want.
Is that the only way you're going to
to
hire now?
Yeah.
People through that?
Yeah.
All right. We only have 5 minutes left with Max because he's a busy man and you have things to do, people to see.
Aren't you
hang
going
out
to like
with,
a town hall?
drink a smoothie.
I'm going to the city.
So important. You're going to wear a suit?
I'm going to wear a t-shirt.
I was going to say, are you dressing up?
No.
You're
going to wear shorts and a t-shirt. I'm going in there and being like, oh, I'm a physical trainer. I was like going with a fucking suit.
Tuxedo on. All right. At the end of the podcast that I'm on, I always ask some questions. I didn't think of any for you, so I want to do these off the top of my head. It'll be more fun. The first one I always ask everyone is, a life of the movie of you is coming out. Who is playing you in the movie?
The two people that came to mind were Jonah Hill and The Rock.
God, those could not be any more opposite.
Holy crap. Have y'all seen that there's some police officer that's like a Rock lookalike out there now?
No.
And he's like making headlines.
Awesome.
And he legit, at least in the photo I saw, I was like, that's The Rock.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if you look like The Rock and you just got to be The Rock?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Jason Statham, maybe he would have to like juice up would be the, but he's got a British accent.
Do your best British accent actually right now.
No chance. I almost did Australian.
Hey, man. Let's cut it off there. All right. You have both cats and dogs. If you could be one for the day, which one would you be?
One of my animals?
Well, no, just a cat or a dog.
Can I choose?
No,
is it a house cat or like any cat?
No,
because I would definitely be a
jaguar.
One of my cats.
No, you can either be a dog or a cat, but they could be out of the house.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Brandon, I'm adding to your question.
I think I would be a cat.
Hell yeah, that's the only answer. Fuck being a dog.
Why would you rather? I mean, like dogs, like
I think my
cats are crazy.
Yeah, they like.
Yeah, they want to kill you.
Yeah,
well,
it would be fun to
saying
just
be a
like
cat.
have free reign to go hunt shit and kill shit with my claws.
Well,
and
I mean,
climb.
technically, dogs could do the same thing, right?
Maybe,
like a wolf.
but like a wolf.
Yeah,
I'm
that
thinking
would
of
be
like
an awesome animal.
the
to be.
bulldog. That's probably the dog that I would be.
Getting up,
pet me and feed me.
Oh man, that's funny. All right, last one.
Octopus.
Well, no, that's
not the question. All right, fine.
What's the next? What's the next animal for Training Think Tank?
I can't give it
So
out.
we're going to have a yearly animal, and you were asking what the next one
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
And when does this year happen? At the new year?
It's the new year. Yeah.
Is it though?
It's
Because
TTT
that's not.
year.
Was it the beginning of 2021?
I don't think it was like the exact beginning. It was sometime in the beginning of 2020.
All right.
But from now on, it'll be the beginning of the year.
How about
I
this
hope
be
it's
your
the
last
anteater.
question? Who's your favorite person in this room right now? Is it Mia? You can be honest.
I have a little bit of favoritism for everybody. That's my political answer.
You could never answer the question.
I don't think I would definitely put me at the bottom of the totem pole.
Just so you know, before we started
not
this,
even on the microphone. That's how bottom she is.
I was going to ask you questions about each coach and make you be honest about you had to give one thing, but I didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable. So if you guys want to see that, maybe next podcast we can ask you questions. I feel
like you could ask one more rapid fire. We got time. One more.
I got 3 minutes left.
I just don't want you to be late.
Yeah.
All right. So we're speaking about coaches. Kyle Ruth was the first one that you hired.
Yeah.
Adam was
How
number
much do
2.
you regret that?
Not at all.
Adam was the second one, correct? Yeah. And then it was me, I think. Yeah.
I think so,
something like that. Of those 3, who's your favorite?
You. No favoritism.
I'm just kidding. All right, guys. Thank you, Max.
All right. Thanks, guys. See ya.